Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. I am joined by my co-host today, Dr. Scott Leune, after seeing each other in person yesterday, right before recording this. Scott, a long time no see.
Yeah. We flew in. I flew in from San Antonio to Scottsdale and then flew home. And I had just about every flight issue you could wish for in one of your nightmares. That was my day yesterday. But I am good to go. I'm home. I slept well. I kissed my kids good morning and sent them to school. And here I am.
It's a better day today. I love it. The best was the three of us, you, George, and I, figuring out how to pose to make the photographer happy and all the things happy. I think we got some great stuff out of it. But
yeah, it was Scottsdale photo shoot. We had to pose and move like models. So uncomfortable. But it's the three older guys doing our best. We'll see how it comes out.
We made it through. Well, we're going to continue the conversation that we've had around the three pillars of a dental CEO, and we've really dived deep into the first pillar of managing operations and the metrics and application of that. And now we've got a couple more pillars. So, Scott, do you mind just framing that outline of what a dental CEO is? What does that mean to be a dental CEO? And then we can get into this pillar today.
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to the last few episodes, you need to stop and go and listen to the last few episodes. But in those episodes, we talked about the fact that there's three main pillars to being a CEO in dentistry in a dental office or dental office group. The first pillar is we've got to manage the day-to-day operations. And those are the things we see people do. That is presenting finances and reappointing patients and getting case acceptance and diagnosing. Those are the day-to-day operations. There's a whole couple series we did on that. The second pillar, which maybe we'll talk about today, is managing the financials. The financials, that's really how we spend our money. The operations, the first pillar, that creates the collections. The financials is mainly how we then spend the collections. And of course, what's left over is our profitability or our EBITDA or our net income, our cash flow. So we need to create as much collections as we can, and we need to spend as little as feasible, and then we're very profitable. That's the second pillar, the financials. The third pillar, which maybe we'll save for another episode, is managing the people. And there's a whole list of things we could talk about there, but the people, of course, are the ones that are creating the collections. They're the ones we're spending our collections on, and we as a CEO need to have the right daily habits so that we're the glue that holds all three of these pillars together so that we've got this very strong dental practice setup.
You know, the financials today is one where I think dentists fall into one of two camps naturally, but both fall prey to what I see very commonly. Either they're naturally kind of tight-fisted or they're naturally spenders. But I think that for most dentists, looking at how much we're spending, controlling that, is not natural. Whether you're tight-fisted, it's just like, I am panicked, and so I'm going to try and minimize costs. But often they don't have a comprehensive picture of what's going on. Or let's just make more, and then we can spend more, and I don't have to worry about it. So that's my perception, but I'd love to hear what you think.
From my experience, we as dentists get caught up a lot in the day-to-day operations, and we don't focus on how we spend money. We're like, we spend money when we need to. We hire someone when we need to hire someone. We buy supplies when we need to buy supplies. We go order stuff from the lab we like that does good work. And we kind of lose sense of budgeting, lose sense of really what I might call boundaries. We don't have boundaries. And whenever you don't have boundaries, you have kind of a yes person, but you don't have the no person. Then over time, obviously, you start spending a lot more money. And many times it takes someone like me, like a coach or a consultant, to kind of come in, look at the financials and say, oh, my Lord, we've kind of gotten out of line a bit with some of these categories.
Sometimes we need someone to look and hold us accountable because we're not always great at doing that ourselves. I think especially when it comes to finances, this is one where there's always justification. There's always like, oh, well, we needed this, or, oh, well, this is the thing I really like. This is how I like to do dentistry. And I think while there is an element of choice and style and what you want, I think having these pictures or these examples of categories and how to set up a budget and the discipline to actually just look at this and be consistent So where do you start?
Well, I mean, the very first thing that's easy to dive into is something that doesn't change the quality of our dentistry. It doesn't disrupt our day to keep healthy, and that is how much we spend on supplies. And when we look nationally, it's very common for dental practices to spend 8, 9, maybe even 10% on supplies. But let me define supplies. Supplies isn't just dental supplies. Supplies is dental supplies and office supplies combined. And when we look at that number, 8, 9, 10% is normal. Although when we can put controls on it, we can get below 4%. Now, let's make this significant. If we've got, a $1.5 million practice, I'll get out my handy dandy calculator right now. If we got a $1.5 million practice and we go from 9% to 4%, just to put this into perspective, that's $75,000 of extra profit every single year for the rest of our career. That's a lot of money. That is significant. That's your that's your retirement plan. That's your kids' college fund. That is, a cruise vacation for the whole office once a year, and something for you and your wife or husband. Like, that is so much money. But most dentists spend it. They don't even look. They don't even understand or know that it could be a lot smaller.
And to reemphasize, I know this might be obvious for some of our listeners, but 75K of extra profit without increasing collections and variable costs and patient flow and staff costs, like those, every dollar of true profit versus having to actually collect more to make more, there's a big difference. So it's like, this is, if your overhead is 66%, this is like an extra 225K of production that just appeared out of nowhere and then led to 75K of, but then you'd have to actually do all the work for that the production.
Yeah, for sure. And so to your point, the fastest way to make more money is to stop spending it, because there's no added cost associated with that added profit, right? So you're absolutely right. When we look at a practice model, we should all be below 50% overhead. When you look at kind of the traditional owner operator dentist take home pay, if you use that terminology, we should be taking home half or more of what we collect as a solo owner operator dentist. So when we look at okay, how do we get below 4%? First of all, most people listening to this that own their own practice probably have no idea what they're actually spending when you combine dental supplies and office supplies. So don't catch yourself making an assumption right now. Go look at your profit and loss statement from your CPA, add dental plus office. That should be less than 4%. Now, a little fine print here. It's dental supplies plus office supplies, but subtract out implant parts. So implant parts are not something that's going to be kind of budgetable. It's going to be based on your patient flow and how many implants you're kind of doing. So that is not something we're going to look at. Of course, we want to spend less money on that as opposed to more money if we can, but that is not part of the 4% number. So it's dental supplies plus office supplies, but not including implant parts. That also means that we've got to tell our CPA to track implant parts separately. And we've got to tell our CPA to combine office supplies and dental supplies in one category. How do we get it below 4%? It's not changing the brand, typically. It's not even changing where you buy it from, typically. Although, if you buy it from a lower cost source, yes, you save money. If you change the brand, yes, you can save money. But for the most part, my experiences in helping offices, it's mostly about implementing a budget, just having the controls in place. The controls say that we will never spend more than 4%. That's our budget. So I can go deeper into that if you want.
I would love to, and I would love to understand. When I think about this, the three parts of this that I see that I would like to give some relative weight to, and maybe they're all equal. But I see there is the budget on the front end, the actual discipline of creating a number, sticking to it, being proactive, thinking about that, having that baked into your culture. There is the process of ordering, whether through buying groups, suppliers, formularies, switching brands. And then there's the physical inventory management to then kind of accurately be able to assess our needs and order just what is needed to stay in budget, but still stay operational. And, some of that involves physical rearrangement of supplies and consolidation and organization. In my mind, those are the three parts of fitting these together. Do you have any sense on the weight? You're saying the budget is where we really kind of make our money here. And then maybe these are kind of secondary and tertiary things to do once you've implemented that budget.
Yeah, the budget's the result. The budget tells you, did we win or not? Like, are we less than 4% or not? So if we can put controls in place that say, hey, we'll never spend more than 4%. I don't care if you're ordering Gucci gloves and Prada gauze and you're storing things in a horrible way where it's just really hard to find stuff. If we could still stay under 4% on what we order, we've won. Obviously, though, if we can store things in a better way, it's easier to stay on budget. If we don't order Gucci gloves, it's easier to stay on budget. For sure, those are good things to do. But the first thing to implement, in my mind, is the ability to even have and act on a budget. The foundation of having a budget, actually operating on a budget. That once we have that in place, then we can try to tweak and optimize the other components to make it easy. Our budget should be 4% of last month's collections is this month's goal. But I don't want to place one order every now and then whenever I get a sticky note or something and I kind of need something. In order to enforce a budget, not only do we need to know what the budget is, but we have to have a process that makes it easy to stay on that budget. What I mean by that is we need to be ordering once a week. Once a week, small orders. It's like a drip coming out of a faucet. We can control how big each drop is. We can control the speed of that. It's very predictable. It's the same day every week and no orders in between that day, those days. No orders, because then we'll break budget. See, when we do it every now and then, we lose the ability to control it. But if we can do it every week, systematically, have a specific amount we can't go over, that's great. And the way you do it is you kind of fill up all your shopping carts with wherever you're going to order from. But before you send anything, you go add it all up and figure out, okay, are we below the number or are we unfortunately above budget? And if we're below the number, great, we can send the order out. If we're above, though, if we're in trouble like that, what we need to do is reduce the quantity of boxes that week. So instead of ordering 30 boxes of gloves, we're going to order 20. And it's okay. We're going to order again in a week, so it only has to really carry us to that next order. But this way, we never order more than our budget. And because it's frequent, consistent orders, we get a frequent, consistent flow of supplies coming in. And we don't fall victim to the temptation of the buy 3, get 1 free offers that cause us to overpurchase, overstock, and blow our budget. Remember, a win is, did our final number get below the budget or not? A win is not, I got an extra bag of this for free. No, that's not a win. A win is, did we stay below 4%? Let's get that first. And then we can get a little more advanced. Like, do we change where we buy from, or do we buy new brands, or do we store our supplies in tip out bins and shelves and track it properly? Let's start with the budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to be honest, people are like, well, how are we going to implement the controls of this, and how are we tracking it? It's like you could do a Google Doc, you could do a Post-it note system, like you could have it on the whiteboard. This is our number for the month, and then you cross out and then put where we're at next after that order. It seems like it doesn't have to be particularly sophisticated as long as you have that target.
We can make it even easier than that. So you've got one person that's placing the orders, but they don't have the authority to actually place it. So they're going to create the order. But in order to place it, they've got to have a second set of eyes approving it. So you've got your dental assistant maybe that does all the work to run inventory once a week, has all the orders ready, has added all up. Yes, it's under budget. Well, the office manager, the owner's got to look at it, do the calculation real quick for 1 minute to make sure it's correct, and then it's approved. Now you've got kind of this accountability, this audit, really. It's kind of like an audit, right? The other layer to this is what I call the accountability moment. Every month, you're going to get a profit and loss statement from your accountant. You need to look at that supply number from this month and make sure it was 4% of last month's collections. Because, even if you're approving the orders once a week before it's placed, that doesn't prevent someone from placing another order you don't know about. So we want to be able to look at the final score, the profit and loss statement, and have this accountability moment where we go to the assistant and say, hey, I just looked at the financials for the month and you were under budget. Thank you so much. Great job. Or I looked at the financials for the month and we were over budget. How is that even possible? Because I approve every order. Are you placing orders in between our ordering day? How did we get over budget? Right? That accountability moment needs to happen so that this sticks in place, that it doesn't revert back to the old way of overspending.
That's where the rubber meets the road. Is, are we checking? Do we have the steps in place? Are we auditing? Are we going back and having that conversation?
As a CEO, absolutely. As
Right.
a CEO, a whole lot of what we do is audit and have accountability moments.
I'll go back to the original conversation we had on the first episode of Shared Practices originally 8 years ago. The thing that was the most surprising to me was how often you said the word audit in that episode. I thought we were going to be talking about all these other systems, and that is what it came down to, is systems don't matter if you're not auditing, you're not holding people accountable. There isn't a way to ensure that we're actually doing these things. So we've given people the basic outline of, do you have a budget? Here's how you set it. Here's how you check it. Here's how you follow up with that. Then, those secondary things of what we order from who, how we organize the supplies, that's all what you would do next to continue to fine tune and streamline, make this easy for people. There's software solutions, there's ways people can get organized. There's a lot that can go from there, but I think we've hit that category overall pretty well. Is there anything else as part of the supplies conversation that comes with this pillar of being a financially responsible dental CEO?
Yeah, I used to be someone that was kind of promoting some of the major buying groups out there. Today, I'm incredibly disappointed with the buying groups out there. One specifically is even using my name improperly, in my opinion, to act like I'm promoting them. So let me just be very clear right now. As of today, September 2024, there isn't a buying group out there right now that I agree with, but there are some privately owned supply companies that have a nationwide presence that have better pricing than a bunch of these buying groups. And so if you're looking for like the lowest price, I'd say look past the publicly traded multi-billion-dollar middlemen companies that I've kind of spoken against in the past, and look past kind of the bigger buying groups that are basically being funded and controlled or have very important relationships with some of those middlemen anyway, and start looking today at kind of newer companies. Maybe in a future episode, we can kind of go through examples of companies like that kind of fall in this newer way of doing things. But I just encourage you to kind of do a little bit of research. But again, it's not the most important thing. That's not the most important thing in saving money. The most important thing is having a budget. Also, storing things in tip-out bins and shelves and having it labeled sounds pretty common sense. It's just so interesting how common it is for people to not use common sense. So having it labeled and stored properly is going to make sure that you're wasting the least amount. So that's something else to think about. Now, there's other kind of expenses, obviously, that we need to control. And the ones I look at commonly are supply costs, lab, and aligner is not part of lab, but aligner costs as well, staffing costs. And then we've got miscellaneous costs like IT costs, software costs, and merchant fees. Those are all areas that we can positively impact through better decision making. And then if you own more than one location, oh my Lord, do you need to be a master of this, because the decisions start getting added zeros, to the end of them. It becomes very, very important.
I think we definitely would have to table that for a future episode, but the principles here, it's a matter of, are we doing this well at multiple offices. So anything we talk about here is, can we replicate this over and over? So I think lab would be another discussion to have right now, if you're okay with it, around, for some reason there's a lot of emotion sometimes tied up in which lab you use, and the decision or the ability to kind of explore and try new labs. You get burned, you have something come back that isn't the way that you want it to be, or maybe the communication isn't there, the speed isn't there like you wanted it, or all these different things. It's hard to I think it's disruptive to a workflow of a typical dentist to switch labs. So I think there's a lot of hesitancy to shop labs. So I'd love to hear your opinions on how to control this expense, how to think about this expense, and how to find the right partner for a dental practice.
Yeah, I think there's little buttons we can push that help the expense side out, and some of us dentists want to push a bunch of those buttons, and some want to just kind of tweak it up and push a few. But first, obviously, choosing labs with lower pricing that give you the clinical quality you're still happy with is important. And if you haven't looked at new labs in a few years, let this be your signal to, hey, maybe try out a couple new labs that are lower priced to see if you're happy with clinical quality, because that decision will last you years and will impact you financially in a big way. In addition to that, using scanning instead of impressions, labs sometimes give us discounts for that. The failure rates are lower when we scan. That has been studied and proven. And then once we start scanning, we might realize, well, milling is something we could do to save money. Printing is something we could do to save even more money. And maybe we're not milling, or maybe we're not printing because we just haven't taken the time to learn. So if we just take the time to learn, this is a big category of expense. I mean, there's offices spending 9-10% on lab as well. That's 150 grand a year. I mean, that's a big expense for the rest of your career. It might make sense to take some time and a handful of $1,000 and learn how to mill, learn how to print, and get that equipment to then permanently save money on this. Another example of what to do is to look at your lab cases a little bit differently. Some of us order from the same lab no matter what the restorative case is. Crown on tooth number 30 gets the same technician as crown on tooth number 8. But obviously there's different aesthetic needs. We maybe could save money on some types of restorations, or back teeth, instead of just having a master ceramist do everything. So that's something else to consider. The material choice is something to consider. And that doesn't even get into the aligner side yet. So the way we measure lab costs is without aligner fees. Just like supplies are measured without implant parts, the aligner fees can completely skew our lab costs and our lab cost analysis. We should be at 5% or less in lab costs. Most of our practices are below 4%, but some are going to be a little bit higher depending on the makeup of their services. If you're higher than that, you need to hit some of these buttons I just said.
It's funny. There was one point in my 2-year residency I did in the Army where I got big into 3D printing, figured out how to, print guides and really get into some of the fun stuff there. I realized there are some dentists and some people just in general, no matter what generation there are, including my generation and younger, that are not computer people. Like, and there is a hesitancy to like dive into technology, and my, managing complex 3D file types, it's getting more and more streamlined. But what I would say is, if you take the time to educate yourself, see what you can do with in-house milling, in-house printing, and also educate some key team members that are wanting to step over to the plate. You need to be familiar enough with all these workflows, but train some great team members. If this isn't something that you personally like pushing that button, maybe there's someone else in your office who would like to learn this with you, and together they can carry the load, but at least you know what's going on. So I would also tell dentists that even if this is not your cup of tea, or not a computer person who enjoys learning software and programs like this, it is worth it, and you can involve your team in the process.
Yeah, it's the wave of the future happening right now in dentistry. It's irresponsible of a dental CEO to not go at least learn about it. So to go to formal training, there's several places you can go where you'll get formal training on exactly how to do this, including support for your team. It's almost to the point where it's irresponsible because this is the next 10 years of dentistry. And there's a lot of arguments saying that there's certain moments where milling and 3D printing is actually in the best interest of the patient, like ethically. It's just irresponsible to not learn. We got to learn. And once we learn, we can decide, okay, does it make sense for us now? How does it make sense? Does it make sense later? And the result will be saving money on the lab fees. So that's really cool. When it comes to aligners, one way to save money is to also utilize 3D printing, whether it's out of house or in house. That's a massive savings. And the software that's available is now going to give us a clinical result that is good. So no longer are we kind of held hostage to just one company, one software program, one aligner fee situation. We have the ability to use 3D printing and open source software in-house or out of house and have these things made for a fraction of the cost. And even if we don't do that, there are now kind of these pseudo buying groups out there just for aligners that have started popping up. And in the decade past, the aligner companies weren't working with people like that, but now it's kind of opened up. So even if you're going to do it the old fashioned way, you might find an aligner group to enable you to save some money on that. Or of course, you could do it the old fashioned way and just use a brand that you haven't used before, a brand that costs less, but still gives you the clinical result. Why would you not go through the research now to figure this out? Every month, every quarter, every year you wait is just another month, quarter, or year you spent thousands of dollars more than you have to. So as a CEO, it's our responsibility to make sure that the decisions around how we spend money is always updated and healthy. It can't be grandfathered in from the past and ignoring today. It has to be reset. It has to be the right thing to do today.
Well, and I love how you've reframed the problem, the pain point that I started with, which was it sometimes is difficult or emotional for dentists to switch labs, or it's a bigger disruption. You're saying this is an ongoing savings of a large item. It is worth it to go through whatever changes or experimentation or trying of new companies required for the result on the other side. So I think now shifting into the topics of IT service providers, tech stack, being fiscally responsible when it comes to that, and finding what works, what's efficient. And it's hard. It's funny. I've talking about tech stack in particular. There are times where I love it where a company sticks to one thing because they do that extremely well and they keep it low cost. And then so many tech stack companies within dentistry want to just kind of bleed over into everything. So everyone does like 7 to 8 to 10 different things, and they do a few of them extremely well. And then these other things, maybe they don't do at the same level. It can be overwhelming, I think, for dentists to make the decision of which software do I use, where do I trim, or what's overlapping, what do I need, what do I not need. So any recommendations on the thought process on the technology and the subscriptions, the software that dentists use?
Yeah, I think earlier in our careers, there were big differences between these tech companies and how they did things. There was a for sure like a winner on getting online reviews. There was for sure like one of the best at online scheduling or confirming appointments or metrics tracking. I mean, there were like the clear winners in all these different categories. So it was very difficult and frustrating, to like say yes to one company that did 5 things, but only one of them was the winner, and then feel pressured to use the other 4 when they were kind of subpar. Today it's changing. So today, when you look at the companies that have a stack of services, for the most part, those services are on par with the best. So technology has gotten to the point where, yeah, we figured out how to do automatic confirmations. Like there's not a one company's the best, everyone else sucks. Like, no, they're all pretty darn good. So the strategy that I kind of use when I think about this is, on one hand, I've got the practice management software that needs to be chosen. And on the other hand, I've got the adjunctive softwares that need to be chosen. Many times we start with the practice management software. Although the larger groups may not, but we start with the practice management software. And if that's a cloud-based software, then the benefit we have is that we get rid of the vast majority of our IT costs, our unlimited IT support every month, our online data backups, our security costs, firewalls, updates. All of those costs kind of get shed away when we have an online based practice management software, cloud based. So that might be $10,000 or $15,000 a year of costs that we shed by going with something that's cloud based versus something that's server based. But a downside to the cloud based programs sometimes is that you can't pick any other adjunctive software or tertiary kind of company to connect with it. So, if you want a metrics tracking platform or a specific online scheduling platform, many times they will not connect with an online based practice management system. But the good news is that the online platforms now, they're online scheduling, their appointment confirmation, automatic appointment confirmations, their text to pay and all that is on par with some of the best kind of outside programs there are. So I think, you start with an online based practice management system, you save a fortune on IT, and then you look at the other kind of nuts and bolts you need to screw onto it that can hopefully talk to it. And you try to save money there as well by going with kind of all-in-one companies, as opposed to the Frankenstein approach of putting on a whole lot of nuts and bolts to try to create your setup. So let me back up a little bit. The old way of doing it was getting something like an Open Dental that was good at kind of a base level of things, but was missing a whole lot. And then like Frankensteining it, screwing on this nut, that bolt, this arm, this leg, and you end up with something that works, very complicated to maintain. You got 15 different logins and you're spending a lot of money a month, $199 a month here, $99 a month there, $299 a month here, just really expensive to do it that way. Today, no, we need an all-encompassing practice management solution, and we may have a little bit of the kind of bolt-on, but those bolt-on companies typically have a comprehensive offering that is good to great in everything they do. Of course, we're going to have preferences, but let's not get confused by the fact we might prefer one thing slightly over another, but it doesn't mean we need that thing. What we need is a kind of holistic setup, an approach, like all-encompassing approach that saves us money and gets us the result we want.
It's like I when I've taken out teeth at offices that are not my office, or in a setting that I'm not used to, I tell dental assistants I'm pretty low maintenance. Just hand me an instrument, I'll probably take a tooth out with it. That might be a little bit more, do the R&D, but there are a lot of ways to do this well, and there's a lot of ways to bundle things together and save a lot of money. And ironically, companies like Open Dental are at times disincentivized from developing anything further, because now there's all these third-party applications that are bolted on to their platform. And if they do any development or they add anything, now all of a sudden they're in competition with these people that have added all these services in. So I do think that what was the common practice 5 years ago, 10 years ago has shifted significantly. And I've loved how you've walked us through that. Moving on to kind of this last, side of other service providers, as well as merchant fees, any low-hanging fruit on areas where dentists just have not thought about a certain expense in a while, and there is fruit to bear by reevaluating their relationship with that.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say something very unpopular right now, but it's not fair that it's unpopular. It's unpopular because of assumptions people make. It's not unpopular because of facts, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's something very unpopular is we should be getting rid of paying credit card fees in dental practices. It's gotten out of hand. One way to cut down credit card fees is to not take insurance payments through your credit card processing. I am just so shocked at how many practices do that, but you're losing, 3.5% on everything you collect through that method. And that's not something we should be doing. But kind of expanding from that, we shouldn't be paying credit card fees for patients' credit card payments. Patients should be paying their own fees. Now, there's this kind of illogical fear that I hear when I kind of talk about this to people, and I read it online. The fear that if you charge credit card fees to patients, they will post bad reviews, they won't say yes to treatment, they'll leave your office. But those things, they're valid kind of feelings to have when you don't know, but it's not actually what happens. So when you implement kind of passing credit card fees over to the patient in the right way, you have hardly anyone ever say anything negative about it. And the few that do are kind of like your go-to jerk patients anyway. These are just people that find things to complain about. Maybe last time they were in, they complained about, some scheduling issue or, running behind a bit. And they're going to complain. Some of them are going to complain about this as well. But the reality is when you pass credit card fees along to the patient, let's say they owe you $100. They're going to pay you $100 with cash or check, or they're going to pay you $103 if they use a credit card. And you can have the credit card terminal set up exactly that way. And what most patients do when they see a terminal is they just pay. They don't ask, they just pay. And the ones that do ask, well, why is this 103? You just say, well, if you'd like to use a credit card, there's a small fee, or you can use cash or check. Like, that's it. And most people just pay. And then every now and then someone's like, you didn't used to do that. I don't like that. They'll say something negative. Don't get sucked into what we commonly get sucked into, thinking that the one jerk patient represents the 300 others you saw before that jerk patient. That's not how it works. That jerk patient's going to say something jerky, and you do the best you can. What I would say is, well, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Jones, but, and I just repeat myself, if you'd like to use a credit card, there's a small fee, or we could just take cash or check. And you don't have to defend. You don't have to over-explain and vomit knowledge all over the patient about an office policy. It is the policy. It's set up to protect you. And for the vast majority of patients, it's going to be just fine. And, credit card fees for a small office are about $15,000 a year. For these larger groups, I shouldn't say larger groups. For these multi-location, privately owned practices, you're looking at $100,000 or more a year. That is a ton of money. I can think of so many good things to do with $100,000 for the practice that's better than giving it to the credit card processing company. We could buy new equipment that we need. We can go to training we need. We can have annual cruise for the staff. We could have health insurance benefits. So much better than just losing it 3.5% at a time, picking up the tab for the patient just because they wanted to pull out what was easy in their purse or wallet, a credit card. And it's funny when you pass it on to them, they start behaving differently. So they will write you a check or get cash more often when they are responsible for their own fee. And sometimes it's a big fee. They will go to the bank, get a stack of cash and give it to you because they don't want to get hit with that fee, but they got no problem with you getting hit with that fee in the past. Now they do something that's a lot more cost efficient. I know this is not popular. I know there's all kinds of people that have done it the wrong way, or most people have never tried it and they just assume bad things. And, unfortunately, that's a weakness of theirs as a CEO, assuming things. You need to try it for 3 months and then make a decision. You need to learn how to pedal on this brand new bike and then ride the bike for a few months and then look back and say, okay, do I like riding this bike or not? And then you make a decision. And I have never seen a practice go backwards on this decision. They've always kept it.
Quick little reinforcement of this. I mean, there are so many rising costs, yet fees are not rising in the same level as inflation or these other things. So the few areas where we can reevaluate what we've always assumed we need to pay, have to pay, and recoup some of that. This is one of those areas. I recently had my basement finished, and the builder is in my neighborhood and is a friend of mine now at this point. And I asked him, I was like, hey, can I, like, we're saving up credit card points to go on a trip next year as a family, and we're going to go try and live in Switzerland for a month. And so I was like, can I run my credit card limit to pay part of this? And he's like, well, I'm going to get hit with a merchant fee, so I have to invoice you for that extra amount. And it's like these credit card points don't come from nowhere. That's what these merchant fees are. And so when I was faced with the choice of I have to pay more to get those credit card points, I just wrote him a check and moved on. And I think our patients are in a similar boat. That if we drive behavior and we appropriately allocate the costs that allow them to get points, then they're going to make decisions how they prefer, whether they prefer the convenience or whether they'd prefer to save a little bit of money.
Well, I prefer to not be hit with their cost. So like I will take cash and check because that is a true form of payment that I actually get the $100 that I'm charging. But if I only charge $100 on a credit card, then I don't get $100. My ledger never matches my bank account. I basically gave a discount. And I decide in my practice, no, we don't need that discount. If they can pay many different ways, and if they choose a way that's more expensive to us, we choose in this specific instance to say, okay, well, you have to bear that added cost for this convenience. And again, I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way for whatever reason, but I get to sit here having done it more than 100 times and get to speak from experience. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to speak to those listeners that have wondered, they're on the fence. Should I not? I'm saying, yes, try it based on my experience. Those listeners that are adamantly, oh, I hate it when they do it to me at a restaurant. I would never do that to my patients. Great. Fine. No, I'm not trying to convince you. But the people that are truly interested and they're just unsure because they haven't had the experience, let me be your experience and tell you you can do this. It's not going to be damaging to the practice.
This has been a great set of very specific, applicable systems and thought processes to apply when looking at how we're spending money in our dental practice. I think these need to be done no matter what. The elephant in the room that we haven't addressed today, and I think we can do a whole set of episodes or a future episode on staff costs and in larger category expenses in the future that are much more disruptive and difficult and strategic as we're expanding or contracting or growing, whatever direction the practice needs to go to have appropriate costs. But these need to happen anyways. And so this has been a great conversation. Anything to wrap us up with this thought process of a dental CEO in the financial realm?
Every decision we make from a cost standpoint is going to be repeated over and over and over and over and over again. So this isn't just like a little decision. How do I run my supply costs, or what lab do I order from? No, what lab you order from is going to be repeated 500 times a year in your career. So this is a really big decision. And even the smallest percentages of savings times 500 become a big number. It's very important that we look at this strictly with a lot of discipline to say, okay, what's the very lowest cost I can go to and get the clinical result or the patient result that I want? And let's not go above that. We definitely need to be a no person when it comes to this. We need to say no to more costs. We need to look at our current costs and pretend like we just bought this practice. Would we repeat those decisions, or is there a better decision today? Let's go with the very best decisions.
I love it. So to tease the next episode, we're going to take this same application of thought, and I think this next episode is going to show us where the rubber meets the road on a lot of different aspects of operations, finance. How do we help our team actually implement the systems and be successful and manage a whole team as a dental CEO? And this will wrap up these three pillars, this framework of thinking about our role. And we'll have to decide if it fits into one episode this next time, or if we need another episode to then talk about like the checklist to keep ourselves accountable. Because you've mentioned this and we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm excited for that. Any tools that we can have to not only lead a team, but lead ourselves and create ease within being a dental CEO. So just a little teaser of what's to come. I'm excited for this next episode.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot. I'm excited as well.
We'll talk to you next time on the Shared Practices Podcast.